I couldn't have ever imagined that I would be introducing you on this farm. I would sooner have thought someone would have appointed me Surgeon General.
That's next.
So without further ado, I'd like to bring up our special guest today. And I don't have to tell you that who he is. I think you all know what he has accomplished in his lifetime. But I would like to read a few sentences from Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, because I think they encapsulate everything you need to know about his work. Quote, "If you eat to save your heart, you eat to save yourself from other diseases of nutritional extravagance, from strokes, hypertension, obesity, osteoporosis, adult onset diabetes, and possibly senile mental impairment as well. You gain protection from a host of other ailments that have been linked to dietary factors, including impotence and cancers of the breast, prostate, colon, rectum, uterus, and ovaries. And if you're eating for good health in this way, there's a side benefit you might not have expected. For the rest of your life, you will never again have to count calories or worry about your weight." Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn.
Should we check the mic?
Yeah. See how much gain we can get here.
A little echo.
Yeah, it's
If that's the case, if you'd rather, I can use the handheld.
I don't know what people think. Ask the crowd. Can they hear
Hello,
you?
crowd.
Is that enough?
Let's give it a start, and if it's too much echo, we'll go to the handheld.
Is it loud enough, folks?
There is an echo.
Yeah, there's a pretty strong echo.
That's the trade-off.
All right.
You want
Do it. Yes,
hold it or you
I'll hold it. Thank you.
All right, sorry about that.
No problem. What an absolute honor it is for me to come and see the mecca of this farm, which I've been hearing about for years. We are so proud of what Ron Weiss and his team has done, and it's very exciting for us to find our way here, even though it was a little bit of an adventure. And you've all been sitting for at least an hour. So one thing I've learned in public speaking, you got to get a break. So let's all do this. Let's absolutely stand up where you are right now, okay? And let's just, now just so you don't hit your neighbor, but twist to the right, twist to the left, twist to the right, twist to the left. Hands all the way up overhead. Once, down, again, down, and again, down. One more twist, left, one twist, right. You got it. Now sit down and we'll try to make it happen. The fact that I stand over here during this presentation does not mean that I don't have great deference for the group of here sitting on the right. It's just that I don't want to stand in front of the slides. I know you're all eager for lunch, so let's get started. You know, it's really rather fascinating when you think that here in this country we have built a billion-dollar industry around an illness that does not even exist in half the planet Earth. That's cardiovascular disease. That's 45% of Medicare. You know, isn't it fascinating when you think about what has happened to smallpox? It's gone. We got the answer. We found the causation. Got inoculated. What happened to poliomyelitis, infantile paralysis? Gone. got the answer. What about heart disease? What about the fact that it doesn't exist in half the planet? Is it because half the planet is taking statin drugs? Or is it because of something, the way they eat? Do you think it's possibly due to their genes or their stress? No. The truth be known, coronary artery disease is a toothless paper tiger, that need never ever exist, and if it does exist, it need never ever progress. This is a completely benign foodborne illness. All right, no known financial conflicts. If you were a cardiac surgeon and you took your shingle and hang it out in Okinawa, the Papua Highlands in New Guinea, how about Central Africa, the rural China, the Tarahumara, northern Mexico, forget it. You better plan on selling pencils. You're not going to do any heart surgery. Why? They don't have heart disease. Why? Because they all thrive on whole food, plant-based nutrition. This slide I took when I was leaving Vietnam. I spent a year there as a combat surgeon in 1967, 68. And it reminds me to share with the audience that when we autopsy our young GIs who have died in Korea of combat, 80% of those average 20-year-olds already will have gross evidence of coronary artery disease. Not enough for their cardiac events yet, but here at that young age, they've already got the disease established. That study was then repeated 45 years later, this time looking at young women and men who had died of accidents, homicides, and suicides between the ages of 17 and 34. Now, the disease is ubiquitous. Everybody. Not enough for their cardiac events yet, but here it is already started. You graduate from high school in this country, and you get a diploma, and you also get the Foundation for Heart Disease. Not a good arrangement, no. So, now here's where we had an absolute chance to get it right. World War II, the Axis powers of Germany overran the Low Countries of Holland and Belgium, right? And when they did this, they took away their livestock for their troops. So their cattle, their sheep, their goats, their pigs, their chickens, their turkeys, gone. Suddenly now, these Western European nations were thriving on whole food, plant-based nutrition. And it was Dr. Strom and Janssen reporting in England's leading medical journal, The Lancet, in 1951, reported the experience in Norway during this time, with deaths in Norway from heart attack and stroke. So let's do this together. Let's start here on the left. And what do you see? 1927, deaths from heart attack and stroke in Norway going up. 1930, going up. 35, going up. 39, in come the Germans. Whoop! 1940, whoop! 41. Who knew these Germans were these great public health educators? Now, but look what happened. Here in 1945, we have this death of Adolf Hitler, the cessation of hostilities in the European theater. Immediately, back comes the meat, back comes the dairy, back come the strokes, back come the heart attacks. But we didn't get it, all right? Now, here's where the vocabulary is going to pick up a little bit, but let's bear with me and we can get through this. Obviously, what you're seeing on the right is a severely diseased artery. And you're probably saying when this closes off, there'll be a heart attack. Well, interestingly enough, although the cardiologist will try to scare you if you find this on an angiogram, this may cause a lot of symptoms of angina, shortness of breath, but probably not a heart attack. 10% of heart attacks from something like this. Because this is stable, doesn't rupture, this is an old plaque filled up with cholesterol and fat and calcium and muscle tissue. But what I really want you to take away from this slide, on the left, even those of you on the back can see this tiny little dark line. this has a name. This is the endothelium. I want you to remember 2 words out of this presentation. This is one of them. This is the endothelium. Each of those is an endothelial cell. And all experts in this disease would agree that where this disease has its inception, its onset, its beginning, is when we progressively injure that delicate innermost lining, the endothelium, because of a magic molecule of gas that it produces, nitric oxide, which is truly the salvation and the protection of all of our vasculature, all of our blood vessels. Nitric oxide. I think you could almost argue that coronary artery disease is a nitric oxide deficiency disease. Okay. Now, when you've been eating the milkshake and the pizza and the hamburger, you tend to get everything sticky. Your endothelial cells get sticky, your platelets get sticky, your white cells, your LDL cholesterol gets sticky. I know you've all been waiting for this. And this is actually, even though I went to Yale, this is from Harvard. Peter Libby, who knows an awful lot about what goes on between the flowing blood and the arterial wall. And let's make sense out of this by showing you that up here in the blue is the blood vessel flowing, all right? And here are these purple cells separating the wall of the artery from the flowing blood, the endothelial cells. But when you have eaten the pizza and the milkshake and the hamburger, and you have developed these crack and fissure and opening in your endothelial fortress, let's start together. Up here in the left, this is your bad LDL cholesterol, which is so sticky, bumps up against the sticky endothelium, finds a crack, a fissure, an opening, migrates into the subendothelial space where it rapidly becomes oxidized by those nasty free radicals that are partly contributed from our food. And that is why Peter Libby here has changed the color of the LDL from orange to yellow. So it's now a small, hard, dense LDL cholesterol, and it is nasty enough so that your subendothelial space doesn't like this and calls upon the SWAT team, the white blood cells, to come across and behave like Pac-Man, gobbling up, gobbling up, gobbling up. Notice that Peter Libby here has painted the white blood cells blue in honor of Yale, and we like that. Now here we have this macrophage gobbling up all these small, hard, dense particles until it gets all the way over to here. When we do in medicine what we do so often, we change the name. It's now called a foam cell. And the foam cell is truly the Darth Vader of this sequence, all right? Why? Because the foam cell manufactures some truly nasty enzymes that we call metalloproteinases, stromelicin, elastase, collagenase, myeloperoxidase. Not on the test, don't worry. Just mentioned it once, but metalloproteinases is what they make. And what do they do that's so bad? The metalloproteinases made by the foam cell take your plaque, not a big one that's 90% blocking, but these small plaques, and over the cap, the metalloproteinases progressively thin, and thin out this cap. And finally, the sheer force of blood racing over that thinned out cap tears it. Now this is the absolute seminal moment. You've now ruptured the cap over your plaque. You have the extravasation, or the oozing out of, if you will, of plaque content into the flowing blood, where it tends to activate our clotting factors like platelets. And in a matter of minutes after that rupture, we now have a clot forming. And this clot that is forming in and of itself self-propagating. So in a matter of further minutes, that goes all the way over here. And suddenly, this artery is totally blocked. All the downstream heart muscle now has lost its oxygen and nutrients, and it starts to die, and that's the heart attack. That's 90% of heart attacks. So, what are you going to do? If I do my job correctly today, every one of you, and hopefully your friends and relatives, will be able to make themselves heart attack proof. You're not going to do this with a drug or a pill. We're not going to do it with a procedure like a stent. We're not going to do it with a bypass operation. We're going to do it by changing your biochemistry. How are you going to change your biochemistry? By eating whole food, plant-based nutrition. Pretty exciting. When that kicks in, you interrupt this entire cascade of events that I've just described. The LDL cholesterol doesn't migrate into the subendothelial space. You don't have the SWAT team coming in. You don't have the formation of the foam cell. You don't have the thinning out of the cap over the plaque. Matter of fact, you strengthen the cap over your plaque. If you strengthen the cap over your plaque, you cannot rupture, and you have made yourself heart attack proof. Pretty exciting. You can do this with food that looks delicious, tastes delicious, smells delicious. No extra money, you got to eat. When did we ever have a deal like that? All right. Now, just when you thought we were through with the endothelial cell, forget the x-ray. Here's an artist's drawing where half of the artery is filled with plaque. And now you see these tiny little endothelial cells lining the part that's opening, that's still open. Now, the endothelial cell, we used to think of that as a sort of a cute little red brick that was lining these wonderful pipes of ours. That all changed in 1980 when Dr. Furchtgott, working in Brooklyn, took the largest blood vessel in the rodent, the aorta. And he took the aorta and he would do a elliptical spiral staircase cut on it. And then he would immerse it in a bath of saline and it would constrict. One day, no cut, all right? No cut. Took the aorta, immersed it in the saline, it dilated. Now the race was on globally. What was the EDRF that Dr. Furchtgott had discovered? Endothelial-derived relaxation factor. Kind of rolls off your tongue. Thank heavens that term was with us only 8 years. At the end of 8 years, Dr. Furchtgott, Dr. Mcnamara, and Dr. Murad found that the EDRF was a gas, nitric oxide, for which in 1998 they received the Nobel Prize for discovering nitric oxide. Now, what makes nitric oxide so special are its functions. One, nitric oxide will keep all the cellular elements within our bloodstream flowing smoothly like Teflon rather than Velcro. It keeps things from getting sticky. Number two, nitric oxide is the strongest blood vessel dilator in the body. When you climb stairs, the arteries to your heart, the arteries to your legs, they widen, they dilate. That's nitric oxide. Number three, nitric oxide will protect the wall of the artery from becoming stiffened, thick, or inflamed, protect us from getting high blood pressure, hypertension. Number four. Now, number four is the absolute key. A safe and adequate amount of nitric oxide will protect us all from ever developing blockages or plaque. Now, number five, nitric oxide will prevent the smooth muscle of the artery wall from migrating into the plaque. And number six, nitric oxide can destroy Darth Vader, the foam cell. Yeah. Pretty exciting molecule. So as my eyes gaze upon this audience of a feast of intellectuals, I know you're probably thinking and sitting there, I can see it. You're saying to yourself, I wonder what my nitric oxide level is. We don't really have a way to doctors regularly measure this in your office yet. There are some gadgets available for $35,000, but how they do it from a research standpoint is you take an ultrasound probe and you place it over at the elbow at the brachial artery, and there you get to read out on the screen the diameter. Then, for 5 minutes, you encircle your upper arm with a blood pressure cuff, and then inflate it above systolic blood pressure. So for 5 minutes, you have zero blood flow to your forearm and hand. I've had that done. It's not exactly habit forming. And then you release the cuff. Immediately then remeasure the new diameter of the brachial artery. In the normal individual, it'll be 30% greater. A response of an outpouring of nitric oxide while that tourniquet was in place. Now, the other thing I want to mention is Robert Vogel, who was chairman of cardiology at the University of Maryland, took a group of healthy young subjects to a certain restaurant which is characterized by arches which are golden. Half of the group had cornflakes. Brachial artery tourniquet test, normal. The other group ate hash browns and sausage. Within 120 minutes after eating the hash browns and sausage, brachial artery tourniquet test, they couldn't dilate it. That single meal of hash browns and sausage had so compromised, so injured their ability to produce nitric oxide, they couldn't dilate the artery. But if they followed them into the late afternoon, early evening, they began to recover. But you and I know the next morning for breakfast, it'll be scrambled eggs and bacon. Lunchtime, we'll have white bread with cold cuts and mayonnaise. And supper time, we'll have a baked potato with sour cream. Lamb chops, vegetables soaked in butter, ranch dressing on a salad, ice cream for dessert. We in the United States, starting as kids, we take that endothelial system that is so wonderful. We beat on it and pound on it and injure it. Imagine this. If you're, to get an idea of your nitric oxide level, if you're 8, 9, 10 years old, ever hear of anybody had a heart attack at 8, 9, 10 years old? What's the level of their nitric oxide? It's sky high, right up here. Now, by the time they're 20, they've been eating this awful diet, and they're 20 now their level is at their chest. But they keep eating this way, and now they're 48 or 50 years of age, and they have a heart attack. It's down at their navel. They had a heart attack. And I'll get a phone call, and the patient will call me and say, Dr. Esselstyn, I think you'd be proud of me. After my heart attack, I'm following your program 90%. I answer, I have no idea in hell whose program you're following, but it certainly is not ours. When you think about it, that means that 10% of the time, you're trying to further destroy an endothelial system that is so destroyed, it's down at your navel, it's going to get lower, and now you're going to get another heart attack. Bring the nitric oxide level up. That's what's so exciting about this. This is not a malignancy. This is a benign foodborne illness. And you can turn around the production of nitric oxide. This is just a summary for those of you who like summaries of what I just said. Prevents nitric oxide, prevents stickiness, vasodilatation, avoids arterial thickening, prevents blockages, smooth muscle. That's really kind of a magic molecule. All right. Now, we're going to have time today. I'm going to really spend on my favorite, the endothelial cell. But these are marvelous other natural defense mechanisms that we all have. And we don't have time today to go into those. But let me just say this. When you are eating whole food plant-based nutrition, you not only are protecting your endothelial cell, but it absolutely optimizes the performance of all these other molecules you see here. Very reassuring. Okay. All right, let's get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty. How do you know this works? So in 1980, I started a small study because I was still so actively involved with surgery. It had to be small. And cardiology sent me these 24 patients who, as my late brother-in-law used to say, were SEs walking dead. They had failed their first or second bypass. They had failed their first or second angioplasty. They were too sick for these procedures, or they had refused. 5 were told by their expert cardiologist that they wouldn't live out the year. Those 5 made it beyond 20 years. And we began to see some exciting results that I want to share with you. These are the foods that you absolutely must omit. These are the foods that every time they pass your lips, you injure your endothelial cells. Any drop of oil, olive oil, corn oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, coconut oil, palm oil, oil in a cracker, oil in a piece of bread, oil in a salad dressing. I know that none of you in this audience ever eat oil.
This is not oil.
Am I getting pretty bad? I just completed writing an article for the International Journal of Disease Prevention and Reversal. The title of the article that I wrote was, "Is Oil Healthy?" And I summarized the animal studies and the human studies showing how lethal it can be. All right, also nothing with a mother or a face, meat, fish, chicken, fowl, turkey, or eggs, and nothing that is dairy, milk, cream, butter, cheese, ice cream, and yogurt, and too much sugar, and I don't like caffeinated coffee. Caffeinated tea, yes, but not coffee. For those of you doubting what I said about oil, here's another. Olive, soybean, and palm oil intake have a similar acute detrimental effect over the endothelial function in healthy young subjects. And this is interesting work for those of you who want to have an argument. For the people who are ketogenic or paleo or brain grain or wheat belly. And here is Stan Hazen's work from the Cleveland Clinic on lecithin and carnitine, which are the molecules that are found in the foods that omnivores eat, all these animal products. And what is so common is that the omnivore who eats these products will contain in their gut bacteria, their microbiome, the capacity to metabolize lecithin and carnitine into a nasty molecule called TMAO, trimethylamine oxide. And what makes trimethylamine oxide nasty is it injures your blood vessels. Here is lecithin and carnitine metabolized by the omnivore's gut bacteria, TMAO, vascular disease. Yeah. And that's been confirmed by other investigators as well. But the exciting thing about this, Stan found that if he gave a lamb chop to somebody who was totally plant-based, measured their blood for TMO, 0. Why? They don't have the bacteria that can, in their gut, that will metabolize lecithin and carnitine into TMAO. Pretty exciting. However, you eat that lamb chop for more than 4 or 5 days, you convert your bacteria. Okay. All right. I'm going to give you a break from cardiovascular disease just for a few seconds because this was such a striking event. In my mind, I can't leave it out in any presentation. This is the World Health Organization making a decision in October of 2015. Think of it for a minute. Absolute cooperation from all these people who are members of the World Health Organization from around the globe, agreeing that it was time to classify red meat as having the same level of carcinogenicity as smoking cigarettes. Pretty powerful. Okay, back to the heart. Now, what are you going to eat? All these marvelous whole grains for your cereal, bread, pasta, rolls, and bagels, 101 different types of legumes, lentils, and beans, all these marvelous red, yellow, and green leafy vegetables, and some fruit. Now, something else that I think has been very important that we've added, not in the book, but you may hear it in some of my presentations. And that is that in the last 7.5 years, when we have patients at our counseling segment, or our counseling seminar, which I conduct at the Cleveland Clinic Wellness Institute once a month, I ask them to imagine shrinking their head to a size that they could crawl into the artery to their heart, and they could see that blockage is an absolute smoldering cauldron of oxidative inflammation. So we need antioxidants. No, don't go down to the health food store and buy a jug of pills that says antioxidant, because it doesn't work and it's going to be harmful. You are going to get your antioxidants from food. Fair enough. What food? Food that is high in what we call ORAC value. ORAC, oxygen radical absorptive capacity. So if you're having raspberries, blueberries, strawberries, and blackberries on your morning oat cereal, that is a terrific start. However, nothing is going to trump the antioxidant value of green leafy vegetables. So I need you to chew, not smoothies, not juicing. I need you to chew 6 times a day a green leafy vegetable roughly the size of your fist after it has first been boiled in water, 5.5 to 6 minutes, or steamed so it's nice and tender. And then you must then anoint it with several drops of a delightful balsamic vinegar. Why? Because the acetic acid in the vinegar has been shown to restore the nitric oxide synthase enzyme contained within the endothelial cell that is responsible for making nitric oxide. So you're going to chew this alongside your breakfast cereal. Again, as a mid-morning snack. Again, with your lunch and sandwich. That's 3. Mid-afternoon, 4. Dinner time, 5. And of course, I adore it when you have that evening snack of kale. What are you doing? All day long, you are bathing and basking that horrible oxidative cauldron of inflammation with nature's most powerful antioxidant. Now, there's other benefits from eating the green. The greens restore your bone marrow's capacity to make the endothelial progenitor cell. What are they? They replace our senescent, injured, worn-out endothelial cells. And the third thing eating the greens does, when you are eating, warm up here. When you are eating the green leafy vegetable, you are chewing a nitrate. As you chew that nitrate, it will mix with the facultative anaerobic bacteria that reside in the crypts and grooves of your tongue. All right? And those bacteria will reduce the nitrate that you are chewing to a nitrite. Now when you swallow the nitrite, your own gastric acid reduces the nitrite to more nitric oxide. A triple header. Pretty fine. So exciting. Yeah. Especially that evening snack of kale. All right. No oil. Now, bear with me for a moment. I want to share with you some angiograms of these patients that confirmed disease reversal. Now, these angiograms were all reviewed in triplicate in the Cleveland Clinic Angiography Core Laboratory by senior technicians that do this all day long for national medical trials. So when I give you a percentage of reversal, I know it's accurate. This happened to be a 67-year-old pediatrician. You're looking at the left anterior descending coronary artery. And this is, believe it or not, a 10% widening from here over to here. It's easier to see. In this 58-year-old factory worker looking at the circumflex artery to the back of the heart, here it was described as increasing from here to here by 20%. Here is one, right coronary artery, 54-year-old security guard. This was a 30% improvement. This is a colleague of mine, Joe Crow. Joe replaced me as chairman of the breast cancer task force. And in 1996, at age 44, he began to get chest pain. No hypertension, not a smoker, not diabetic, no family history, regularly exercised, chest pain. Finally, in October of 96, cardiology worked him up. Boop, could find nothing. A month later, he finished his surgical schedule. He sat down to write postoperative orders. Boom! The elephant suddenly was sitting on his chest. Pain, jaw, left shoulder, arm. Having a heart attack. Whipped down to the cath lab. They start the catheterization. Cardiac arrest. Resuscitate. Finish the catheterization. One more cardiac arrest. Resuscitate. 3 days later, he's stable. He's discharged, but very depressed. Why was he depressed? Because at the time of his angiogram, they found that his left anterior descending, the entire lower 1/3, was all moth-eaten and diseased. Over too long a segment, you just can't pound in stent after stent after stent. And it was too far down the artery for a bypass, so he was depressed. So Ann and I had Joe and his wife out for supper 2 weeks after his heart attack. Joe, look, you've been eating this crappy American diet, and you've got the typical disease. We've got 10 years of data. Why don't you think about going plant-based? Okay, yes. They couldn't offer me anything else. I'll give it a shot. He became the absolute personification of commitment to whole food plant-based nutrition. And over the next 2.5 years, his total cholesterol plummeted. LDL went from 98 to 38. And then he had another angiogram. Now, up in the area where the surgical offices are, our doors are three doors apart. At noontime, on the day that I knew that earlier that morning he had had his follow-up angiogram, I walked over to his office, let myself in, and there he was, sitting behind his desk. Joe, I understand you had the old follow-up angiogram earlier this morning. Mind sharing with me, how did it go? He said, well, got up from his desk, put his arms around me, had a couple of these. He said, you know, I think we may be doing okay. I said, oh, really? Would there be any chance that I could see the angiogram? He said, sure. Now, this is not going to happen with everybody. But when the plaque is young and soft and new and made up of inflammation, fat, and cholesterol, the body has a remarkable job of doing this reversing. Maybe 25, 30, 35% of patients. What about the ones that have had the plaque for decades, made up of fibrosis and scar and calcification? Probably not going to go away. However, even those patients can get back to full activity of daily living without restriction. It's going to be my responsibility today, before we close up shop, to let you know how those patients also can do it and get it right. Okay. So, now, despite my sparkling personality, there were 6 of those original 24. Nice guys. But I just knew within the first month, and I had no money for this study, that they didn't get it. And so I released them full-time back to their expert cardiologists, and they became sort of my quasi-control group. And over the next 12 years, those 6 patients, 2 died, and the other 4 had to have bypass surgery. On the other hand, what about those 18 patients that stayed with us? I wanted to know, in the 8 years prior to coming into our study, while they were in the hands of expert cardiologists, is this the next speaker?
Just say Alexa.
Is this a heater?
It's either that, or I'm going to have to start blowing on you.
I'm well hydrated. So we have these patients that were followed out, and during the 8 years prior to coming into our study, They had had 49 cardiac events in the 8 years prior to the study while in the hands of expert cardiologists. But once they came into our study for the next 12 years, 17 of the 18 on our program had no further events. One little sheep, after 6 years, got into the lamb chops, French fries, glazed donuts, more chest pain, bypass, and now he's back with the flock, but proves the point that I'm trying to share with you today. Now, we got pretty well hammered for this study. Dr. Esselstyn, that's a small amount of patients, wasn't randomized, wasn't controlled, and how do you know that that diet is pretty strict, severe, draconian, extreme, and the patients really won't follow it? What makes you think that you could do a larger study and get the same results? So, 2014, July, Journal of Family Practice, they published our 200 patients, okay? Now, I heard earlier in the discussion that preceded my presentation, there was discussion about getting patients to adhere, and we were really excited. 89.3, almost 90% of the patients that we've seen seem to be willing to follow this. And I want to share with you a couple of wrinkles that we have that may apply elsewhere. When you are asking, as a physician, a patient to change their lifestyle, this really is getting pretty close to the bone. And it's not mine. And therefore, I think the way that you're going to have patients make this lifestyle change is you must show the patient respect. The only way that I know to show a patient respect is to give them my time. So when we have a counseling session with 12 or 14 patients, my secretary will give me 2 weeks beforehand a list of who's coming and their phone number. And I personally insist on calling each of these patients so that I can get my arms around their story, and at the same time provide them an opportunity to ask questions of me, so that coming to the seminar, we have a strong platform from which we can all move forward. And since that's 6 hours, we've really found that there are very few physicians who are spending 6 hours with their patients to do this. And there are obviously other ways to do it, but this is one that happens to be, we find, quite productive. Now, the other thing that I should share with you, although I've already told you about it, you cannot emphasize enough, I find, to the patients, simplify the science. Let them know that what they have done, they have created this disease. It wasn't their genes, it wasn't their stress. It was the food they have eaten has so destroyed the endothelial ability to make nitric oxide. It is down here. And then when they've had an hour of nitric oxide discussion in endothelial cells from me, how can anyone with a brain in their head look me in the eye and say, Dr. Esselstyn, you know, Lois and I are going to have our 35th wedding anniversary when we leave here, and we can't wait to go out and destroy some more of our endothelial cells. How's that going to happen? No, you really, absolutely, we have patients who sometimes really break down in tears when they suddenly get the understanding that this disease isn't some great mysterious thing that they don't know when they're going to have their next heart attack. No, that moment in life, they can take charge. They never again have to have another stroke or another heart attack or progression of this disease. And I think that's something that, plus we give them a very hefty notebook with a copy of every PowerPoint slide and a bunch of other stuff that helps, we think, as well. Now, all right, so how do I know the patients in this study were sick? 119 of the 177 who were compliant had already had a bypass or a stent. But what was getting to be so exciting then, and even more so now, patients frequently call me saying, Dr. Esselstyn, I was said I had to have a bypass operation, and I don't want to have it. I said, well, that is your decision. But I will just share this other point of view with you. And really, we're at the point now where literally, there's no question that when somebody's in the middle of a heart attack, bypass or a stent can be absolutely life-saving. That data is clear. But when you're asked to have that stent electively, no. There is no prolongation of life and no protection from a future heart attack when it's done electively. Interesting data. So, how did we do? Of those who were adherent, we did have one patient while in China, misbehaving, ate off the economy, small stroke. Those that were non-adherent, the 21, 62% of those had further progression of disease. So let's now stack this up against medicine's best heart studies. Over here on the left, you will see major cardiac events, heart attack, stroke, and death. So let's start over here on the right with the Mediterranean study, the Lyon Diet's heart study, well known, very respected. 25% of those people at 4 years will have a heart attack, stroke, or death. Out of Columbia Presbyterian in New York City, Natural History of Coronary Disease, 20% will have heart attack, stroke, and death at 4 years. And with Bill Bowden's Courage study, 19%. So somewhere around here, 3%. But look at us. Treat the cause. One patient. That's over a 30-fold difference. What is going on here? Well, what is going on is what we talked about when we started this, about smallpox, about polio, about other things. When you treat and eliminate the cause. When you eliminate the cause of heart disease, the disease stops. Okay. Pretty exciting stuff. Because when you think about it, ever since the days of Hippocrates, there's been a basic covenant of trust between the caregiver and the patient that whenever possible, the caregiver will share with the patient what is the causation of the illness. And sadly today in cardiovascular medicine, that's not being done. However, I'm happy to say that 4 years ago, I was invited by the American College of Cardiology to become a member. Why? They wanted me to become a member of their nutrition committee because we really want to try to get cardiologists to have some education about the causation of the illness that they've been designated to treat. Yeah. All right. Now here's another small study. 3 patients. Now what business did I have writing about 3 patients in July of 2014? Well, to me, these 3 patients absolutely were a personification of what is wrong presently with the cardiovascular community. And that is, let's take a look at the first patient is Rob Mercer. And Rob Mercer is from Newfoundland, and I have yet to meet him, however. His story began at age 44. Completely occluded his right carotid artery, small stroke, but he was having at the same time severe angina. And they found an accomplished surgeon in Toronto who boldly went ahead, even though he had totally lost the right carotid artery to his brain. He had a wonderful result until he was now 69, 70 years of age. And of all things to have happened at that time, let's see, his angina was back. He was 40 pounds overweight. He was diabetic, had erectile dysfunction, and his one remaining carotid artery to his brain was now 90% blocked. Of all things to have happened at this time, his 37-year-old daughter had a heart attack. During her convalescence, she found a book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And she said, "Pop, we got to do this together." They did. A year later, I got a letter from Bob Mercer. "Dr. Esselstyn, thank you. I've lost 40 pounds. All of my angina has disappeared. All my erectile dysfunction has disappeared. And my diabetes has disappeared. And my one remaining carotid artery, which was 90% blocked, is now 67% blocked." And here is Bob Mercer before and after. Now this next is Art Soteros. Art, at age 32, overweight, became diabetic. Art, at age 42, went to the Cleveland Clinic for the first of 14 stents. After those 14 stents, they said, "You have aggressive disease." And you need a bypass. So he had the bypass, and that was good. for 12 months. And the angina returned. A fellow parishioner told him about our seminar. He came, he lost 40 pounds, all of his chest pain disappeared, and he regularly showed up at our seminar to share his story. Now, there's Art. Then the last was Jim Mcnamara, age 55, small stroke. They tried to operate on his carotid. It failed, totally got blocked. Then he began getting pain in his left leg. It got worse and worse and worse. So they operated once, it failed. They operated twice, it failed. Third time, failed. Told, you know, you have this aggressive disease. You're going to have to just take these drugs. His wife found out about our program. Within 3.5, 4 months, he'd lost his 35 pounds. He was no longer pre-diabetic, and all of his walking pain had disappeared. So in summary, what have we got compared to what we have with bypasses and stents? There's no mortality from the diet. There's no morbidity with the diet, and the benefits improve with the passage of time. And for the poor patient who's had a heart attack, who's walking around with a sword of Damocles hanging over their head, when do I get the next heart attack? Nonsense. You never have to have another heart attack. The patients are empowered that they are the locus of control. All right. Now, wrapping up here. You can't tell me you're not getting hot, too. But I got a fan. What's the good of a great heart if your brain isn't there? Now, we know that by the time you're 50 years of age, excuse me, by the time you're 85 years of age in Sweden or the United States, 50% of people will now have dementia. A horrible reward for a lifetime of hard work. But we got great insight into this from the work of Megan Leary and her team from the West Coast, who, reporting at the stroke meetings in Miami in 2001, had looked at over 5,500 MRIs of the brain of Americans. And what they begin to see at the MRI at age 50 in Americans is these tiny little white spots, little strokes. But at age 50, big brain, tiny stroke, not much of a problem. However, now you're 65, goes by like that. 15 more years of the good old American diet, and you find yourself more often than before saying, sweetheart, where did I leave the car keys? Well, you get through that. Suddenly you're 75, and it becomes, sweetheart, where did I leave the car? Well, you get through that, and bingo, you're 85. And you look at her and you say, are you my sweetheart? I can't reverse that. You don't suddenly wake up on your 85th birthday with dementia. You work hard in all those previous decades to lay the foundation for that disease. Doesn't have to happen. Here we do. There is a normal MRI. Here is one. I counted 90 of those strokes. Look at that scar. Can you imagine a message going through that scar tissue? Now here on the left, you've got a brain that is all the way up to the skull. Wonderful. Here on the right, look at the brain. That's cerebral atrophy. Look at this big gap. You don't want cerebral atrophy. How do you protect against it? Exercise. Exercise. So if you're going to do it walking, almost 4 or 5 times a week, fast enough till you're almost ready to break a sweat, or you can swim, or you can run or walk fast, but I want you to see that's pretty straightforward. What are the parts of the brain that will enlarge as you exercise? The hippocampus for memory, the frontal lobe for executive thinking. Now, what about the rest of your muscles? Here you see on the left, the thigh muscle in a 40-year-old triathlete. Here on the upper right, the thigh muscle in a 74-year-old couch potato. Here on the lower right, thigh muscle in a 70-year-old triathlete. The answer, exercise. Pretty straightforward. All right. Now here on the left, you will see the pulse volume taken of the ankle, right ankle, of a patient when I first started seeing him. He had to stop 5 times crossing the skyway to my office because of pain. in his calf muscle because he had this partially blocked artery in his thigh. But I was so focused on his heart, I totally forgot about his leg. 11 months after he'd been seeing me, he said, Dr. Esselstyn, do you recall when I first started coming to your office, I had to stop 5 times crossing the Skyway? Yeah. He said, you know, the last month it got to be 4 times, then it was 3, then it was 2, then it was 1. He said, I don't stop anymore, the pain's gone. Okay, Don, in that case, back you go to the vascular lab. And look at, bingo! The pulse volume was now double. This was when this study was just starting. We now had absolute, irrefutable, rock-solid scientific proof that food and food alone could absolutely reverse cardiovascular disease. And you're going to say, well, wait a minute. What about the statin drugs? Well, wait a minute. This was 1986. We didn't have any statin drugs. So I've given you 2 outstanding examples today. Dr. Crow, who refused statins and had remarkable reversal, and Don, who did it simply with food, so that patients who cannot take statins are in no way precluded, if they follow this correctly, from enjoying equally beneficial results. This happens to be another gentleman. Actually, he is a 78-year-old retired high school chemistry teacher. In his retirement, he and his wife loved to enter square dance contests. But it was always during the fast square dance that he was getting bilateral calf pain because the vascular surgeons that he saw did this imaging, and you can see the amount of disease that he had in his extremities. So when he came to see us in counseling, he said, Dr. Esselstyn, if I choose your method, how long will it take for me to get relief of my calf pain? So I looked at him with great wisdom in my face. And I said, probably about 10 or 11 months. 3 months later, I got a phone call. Dr. Esselstyn, you do not speak the truth. The pain is gone. All right. Now, although I work most of the time in Ohio, and during the summer at the farm where I grew up in upstate New York, I know that in Cleveland, I want to share with you, when we're watching a sporting event, or if we're watching a mystery, just before the advertisement come on, you will hear the mellifluous tones of the announcer say something like, when the moment is right, will you be ready? Now, we all know that the penile artery is really quite tiny compared to the coronary artery to the heart. So indeed, not infrequently, before somebody comes down with heart disease, they may find they are no longer able to raise the flag. However, all is not lost. Not infrequently, 10 or 11 months after I've counseled somebody, I'll get a phone call. Dr. Esselstyn, yes, this is Mr. So-and-so. Sure enough. Yeah, he said, you know, I really thought I ought to call you because recently something has come up. And I'm wondering if I don't owe you another check. All right, now I promised you, before we ended, what are you going to do with those patients who have coronary artery heart disease? The plaque is old, made up of scar and fibrosis and calcification. Well, now let's prove that something happens. So what you're looking at now, this is important. You're looking at a PET scan on the left. This is a PET rubidium dipyridamole scan. PET scan. That translation, if it is orange or if it is yellow, that's good blood supply. But here, it is all green and it's poor in this gentleman who was a Youngstown, Ohio school bus driver, age 60, cholesterol 248, when I saw him here. We counseled him here. 6 weeks later, he came back. He got it repeated. Bingo, it's all back. The cholesterol came down to 137. Bingo, it's back. What is going on here? We haven't washed out plaque. You don't get rid of plaque in 4 to 6 weeks. That may be months and months and months or a year. But it happened. Why? So here is a heart without any muscle, all blood vessel. And what I want you to know is this. The vessels that get all the publicity with stents and bypasses, the right coronary artery, the left anterior descending, the circumflex. And what do? They all dive into the muscle, right? That's where they're carrying the oxygen and nutrients to the muscle, okay? So I then asked to Rodriguez, who was the Cleveland Clinic cardiovascular pathologist who dissects through over 200 hearts a year from the deceased. And I said, Ron, how often do you ever see standard good old garden variety plaque in the artery once it is in the muscle? Never. What? Once in a very, very great while in a severe diabetic. But other than that, never. We now had our answer. Because what's going on is this. You see in this picture those three major arteries, and look at this. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of these intramuscular arteries. But I maintain that even though they do not have plaque, when we first see these patients, their endothelial cells are so beaten down, their nitric oxide is so low, that what has happened now is your endothelial cell has become your enemy. When you have beaten it down so severely, it is now making two molecules that are vasoconstrictive, thromboxane and endothelin. And they're hardly making any nitric oxide. So as soon as you stop the injury to the endothelial cell, this is how remarkable and how rapidly it comes back. It stops making those vasoconstrictors, starts making nitric oxide again, this powerful vasodilator. You then open up this entire cascade of thousands and thousands of interlacing vessels. So even though you've got some mild blockages in those major arteries, all those arteries start to open up. And if you recall in physics, Poiseuille's law of flow through the hollow viscous is related to the fourth power of the radius. Translation, tiny increase in diameter, huge increase in flow. Maybe I can find the other one. No, okay. But this is the absolute key. It's so important that you understand what I've just said, that all those small vessels in these patients that when we see them are so beaten down. When you open up this mammoth cascade of vessels opens up, that's what suddenly happens to this reperfusion. It all comes back. Pretty exciting. All right. So here how you measure disease reversal. You can see reversal on an angiogram, which I've showed you. The stress test can reverse. I've showed you the reversal on the PET scan. Talked about the reversal in the carotid, in the leg with the pulse volume, and of course the reversal of the symptoms of angina, claudication, and erectile dysfunction. Now, for those of you who don't get to Cleveland very often, I like to show this slide because I want you to know on the 8th floor of this building where I spent many years as a surgeon, this is how the trees look like in Cleveland in February. Right. However, now that I've transitioned from surgery to the Wellness Institute, the budget is somewhat more modest, but the morale is really quite high. And one thing I've learned in 58 years since leaving medical school is that while brains are important, nothing is as important perhaps as persistence. Persistence is best exemplified by this young damsel, Life magazine, 1939, trying to learn how to do the splits. It is tough to learn to do the splits, but the other day, sure enough, Ron Weiss found himself downtown Chester, and he spotted her, and sure enough, there she was. So in summary, I would simply say to you, once again, it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. If you would ask why it is that somebody 20 years after retiring from surgery is still involved in medicine, is quite honestly, it's because I really see at this moment that on the horizon is truly possible, a seismic revolution in health. And the seismic revolution in health is never going to come about with the invention of another pill, another procedure, another operation. But the seismic revolution in health will come about when we have the will, the grit, and determination to share with the public what is the lifestyle, and most specifically, what is the nutritional literacy that will empower them to absolutely annihilate chronic illness. Thank you.
Would you like to take a few questions, Dr. Esselstyn? Okay. I will go around and then I'll bring you the, you take the mic and I'll shout. Questions? We'll take a few. Yes, sir. In your studies, this gentleman wants to know if, were these organic vegetables?
No, they could, some were, some weren't. But you don't, you're going to be okay even if you can't afford organic. Yeah, although organic is preferred.
Can you speak to omega-3s and nuts and seeds in particular, and then specifically for someone with coronary artery disease?
In my book on page 69, I'm a little cautious. Excuse me, I say it's okay for patients who don't have heart disease to have nuts and seeds and what was the other thing?
Omega-3.
Omega-3?
Yeah, well.
Yeah, and omega-3. But if patients do have heart disease, then I get to be a bit of a taskmaster. Although I've been a taskmaster, I can tell you that I've been told that I'm not as mean as I look. But I don't want patients with cardiovascular disease to go off into peanut butter and cashew sauce and nuts. I've never seen any study giving patients with serious heart disease nuts and never have the disease reversed. Matter of fact, of omega-3, the jury is still out. How many times in the history of medicine have we heard of people who have gone to the emergency room and saying, "My God, help me out, I'm omega-3 deficient"? It's gotten a lot of publicity. Some of that publicity comes from people who are selling omega-3. And that isn't science, that's a commercial. So we really have to keep our eyes and ears open. I don't think you do any harm by having, I encourage patients to have, chia seeds, even heart patients, or a flaxseed meal, a couple tablespoons, and plenty of green leafy vegetables, which are loaded with omega-3. Yeah.
Right. And even if you have known coronary artery disease, but with a whole food plant-based diet, you have reduced your LDL to very favorable levels without medication. Still, you would say be very cautious about nuts and seeds beyond chia and flax.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
CoQ enzyme, then, is that?
CoQ enzyme? Yeah. If patients come and they're taking it, I don't ask them to stop it. If they come and they're not taking it, I don't ask them to start it.
Thank you. Great speech. You seem to say that perhaps this isn't found in nature, cardiovascular disease. So I'm wondering, do you ever see it in mammals like lions and tigers? The argument goes from some of my peers that, we've evolved to eat meat. We're now hunters. We're not fruit eaters. So can you give me some pushback on that argument?
It's interesting. When you look, what is the biggest animal in the meadow who is servicing all those heifers? The bull. What does the bull eat? Grass, right? No heart disease, right? What is the elephant's pretty big and pretty strong. What do they eat? Yeah, they eat leaves and branches, right? There's no meat. Hippopotamus, giraffe. Yeah, the list kind of goes on. It's interesting that I know of no diets of plant-based that'll encourage the formation of diabetes and hypertension and cancer and heart disease. But meat is notorious for that, right? And that's how we develop vascular disease, by injuring the endothelium. You've heard by now, I hope, that you know how severe meat can injure the endothelium. Okay. No, there's no question. You can eat meat, and if you want to live to your 28, 29, great. Good.
Hi.
Sir.
I'd like to hear your opinion on two topics. One is if you go plant-based, which I have, great thumbs up. B12 deficiency, especially if your homocysteine levels are high. That's the first topic I'd like to hear. And then the second one, lately, all this talk about lectins. Get your comments on that.
Was that about lectins?
Yeah.
Yeah, lectins are a non-event when you cook your food, okay? And the other question was B12. Yes, we would encourage patients to take B12 if you're 60 years of age, maybe 500 micrograms a day. By the time you're 70, because you're going to have less intrinsic factor and less gastric acid, and the absorption will be less. My authorities suggest at least 1,000 micrograms a day at over 70.
First of all, thanks for the work that you're doing. We help a lot of people. We've heard at least one other plant-based doctor suggest that low-fat diets were intrinsically, well, maybe not damaging, but certainly bad for you relative to a diet that contains more fats, and they have some specific recommendations. Do you have a view on fat levels, and can you talk about that?
What level of fat do you suppose the Okinawans are worrying about? How about the Papuan Highlanders in New Guinea? Are they worrying about, what about rural Chinese? Are they worrying about their fat levels? Or how about those who are in Central Africa, are thriving on whole food plant-based nutrition? They're not going to be fat deficient. As a matter of fact, Bill Connor, who was a wonderful physician, went down to the Tarahumara and looked at 583 of these and measured them and could find no evidence whatsoever of nutritional deficiency. Now, the other argument you might want to say is when patients are pushing the, forget what you had mentioned initially.
The low fat?
Yeah, the low fat.
Yeah. Low fat choice.
Yeah, ask what is the diet that they are interested in that will take patients who are seriously ill with heart disease and reverse their disease. There's been one diet that has shown that. Whole food plant-based nutrition. The boss.
Okay. So this young lady handed me a wrapper of dark chocolate. And I guess a lot of people think that, you know, dark chocolate bars are healthy. And maybe we want to know if you agree with that.
No, if you will look,
No milk?
read the ingredients.
Okay. May I?
Read the ingredients. Out of 12 grams, 10 grams are.
So the first ingredient, so this is a divine chocolate, exquisitely rich. Dark chocolate, 85% cocoa. So probably as much as you can get. Ingredients. Cocoa mass. Number 2, cocoa butter.
Now we're getting there.
Number 3, sugar.
You're doing great, Ron.
Number 4, cocoa powder. Number 5, sunflower lecithin,
Yeah.
which is an emulsifier.
If you would look at the label where it says, look at the grams of fat.
I'm going to have to lie down first. So the total fat for a serving.
Yep.
And mind you.
Yep. Yeah, I got it. 1 square.
There are 2 servings in here.
Yeah.
Would give you 22 grams of fat, which is 28% of your daily allowed intake according to the federal government.
I have to make a comment.
And
I have to make cocoa, where the cocoa butter has been removed, and then you don't have that fat.
Just use cocoa.
That's the way you roll with your wonderful recipe.
Educating my husband a little bit more. That's great. I'm not exactly plant-based, but I'm vegan, and he's not. And I just wanted to know, I'm not whole food plant-based because I have trouble with oil. I have trouble totally eliminating oil from my diet. And I was just wondering, are there some oils that might not be as bad as others?
Well, I usually answer that by saying, would you rather be shot or hung? No, you can do it without oil. You talk with Ann because you can exist without oil. There are millions of people on the planet who do eat that way, and it'll even happen here in New Jersey.
Hi, of the foods you said to avoid, you mentioned caffeinated coffee. Is it the coffee or the caffeine, and what about caffeinated tea?
I know, but I will do this. I will share with you the study. And it was an Italian study. And they took healthy young subjects, and they had them divided into 2. Half of them drank coffee with caffeine, the other half drank decaf. After they drank, they then had the brachial artery tourniquet test. Then they switched groups. The group that formerly was having decaf was now having coffee with caffeine. It was always the group that was drinking coffee with caffeine that experienced endothelial injury and dysfunction. I don't know. Maybe it's the combination of the caffeine and the coffee, but I know that caffeine and tea, we don't seem to have that objection to.
Why don't we take 2 more questions? This young lady.
Hi, my question's about dairy. Does the non-consumption of dairy have anything to do with where baby animals only have mom's milk when they're babies and then no more milk once they're adults? Does that have anything to do with it, or is it completely different things? Dairy, no.
No, we're totally for nursing. Is that what you mean?
No. Does it have a connection to the fact that animals don't get coronary disease because babies only have milk and the baby and they
No, I think when you think about it, I think that when the animals in the wild, how often do they ever eat anything out of a box, a bag, or a can? No, what really we're at is that processed food. When you go into a grocery store, if you have to read ingredients, it means you're really living out of a box, a bag, and a can. If you go where there is, oh, I didn't do this, I should tell you, what are the greens that I was talking about? They are bok choy, Swiss chard, kale, collards, collard green, beet greens, mustard green, turnip greens, napa cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, cilantro, parsley, spinach, and arugula, and asparagus. And the top 5 are kale, Swiss chard, spinach, arugula, beet greens, and beets. That's what it does for your memory.
Where's the telephone?
Hi, thank you so much. This is amazing. I just wanted to ask about sodium and salt and how that impacts heart disease as well.
Yeah, and the question is about sodium and salt. And the question is about sodium and salt. Anne never cooks with salt.
We don't have it.
But if you feel that the food is a little flat, if you feel the food is a little flat, with a salt shaker, you're not going to get very much at all, but it may make the flavor a little better.
I don't eat salt anymore. I had high blood pressure.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to doctors.
No, you don't.
Don't take it anymore.
I'm not asking you to have...
No. I'm just asking, like, what is the direct impact? Because all doctors said lower your salt, but they never said why. So that's...
Well, because salt seems to contribute to hypertension. Yeah.
We have one more. Young lady.
Do you see anemia in people on plant-based diet? And if so, what would you do?
If I see...
Anemia.
Oh, anemia.
Yeah.
We don't seem to see that. I mean, I look at my friend Colin Campbell, who did the China study. We're looking at over 6,000 of those Chinese, and those eating plant-based anemia was not a problem.
Thank you so much. You know, Dr. Esselstyn, this is one of the most historic farms in America. I said one of them because I know your farm is 100 years older and perhaps more historic. But I think in the 300 years this farm has been in existence, perhaps this is one of the most historic days that it's ever seen. Thank you so much for coming. And in deference to you and Anne, thank you so much for coming here and driving all of this way. We're going to now have a fantastic potluck lunch of all the foods that Anne and Dr. Esselstyn love. We just wanted to say just a couple of words before you get up. Is Jody Cass around? Okay, if you can come up, Jody. There's something that Jody has to say to you. But before she does that, I'd like to just do two things. First of all, I'd like to thank all of the volunteers that made this day happen. Without these volunteers, we wouldn't have been able to have this event. Okay. That's Chrisanne Polito Muller, Brooke Shanley, Rose Lopiano, Sophia Spiridakis, Karen Spiridakis, Anthony Masiello, Kathy Masiello, Evan Masiello, Henry Masiello, Sean Downs, Lauren Sweatman, Denise Bowl, Robert Stolpe. These are all of your children. They're all here and working to have you come here. Can you all stand up wherever you are? Thank you. Second announcement. Now we know it's not your birthday, but we have a cake anyway. We want to show everyone how to celebrate a birthday with plants so that you can live another year and another year. And today is our farmer Nora's birthday. Where is Nora? In addition to Jim. Jim, our great page. Is Jim here? Jim. Okay. So, everybody. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jim and Nora. Happy birthday to you. Describe the birthday cake, please.
Yes.
Inspired perhaps by prevent and reverse heart disease.
Yes. So it has raw cacao powder, walnut. Pankaj made it, so I want to make sure. Am I saying, where's Pankaj? Where is he? Because he was the one. I want to get the ingredients from him. Pankaj. Pankaj, are you here? Can you give us the ingredients for this brownie, this rich brownie? They're pretty rich.
Because I'm hungry.
Yeah. What are the ingredients? Walnut, pecan,
Walnut, pecan,
sunflower
sunflower seeds, dates, and cocoa powder.
Okay. Sunflower seeds, dates, and yes.
With your permission, we'll cut it into tiny little 300 pieces, and everyone can have some birthday cake.
So
Happy birthday.
Except for Nora, she gets the big one. Oh, I'm gonna go over there. She gets a big glass and she went for Esselstyn now. Anyway, it's bring a watermelon cake out.
Hi everyone, I'm Jody Cass. I'm the Executive Director of the nonprofit organization Plant Pure Communities. And Ron had asked me to just say a couple of words. First, I just want to say thank you to Ron and your team here. Really, this place is a national treasure. It's really remarkable. The work you're doing here is so pioneering for our health, for the food system, and for climate. So thank you. There's a new collaboration getting underway, and that's really that's the main thing that Ron asked me to just quickly mention to you. Plant Pure Communities is a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit. The organization was created by Nelson Campbell, who is the son of Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who I think is coming here in October. I actually serve on Dr. Campbell's board as well. And the organization is working to help share this message globally. And when we realized the important work that was happening here, we were thrilled to be asked to collaborate with Ethos Farm. And so we are doing that. And I think we'll be entering into an agreement either sometime this week, it looks like. And the great thing is that these events that Ron has been doing and the Ethos folks have been doing are so important to all of us with our health and our family's health. But they're very expensive, and they're really not sustainable as just taking money out of his pocket. So one of the great things about this collaboration is that it's an opportunity for folks who want to make a donation to support this. Will be able to make a donation to Plant Pure Communities, and the funds will go to help support the costs of renting the tent and other things connected to these kinds of events. And we'll hopefully be doing lots of other events as well and projects connected to all this really important work. We will probably be sending you an email soon, and hopefully you'll take a look at that when it comes and be generous. Thank you.
Is Meg here? Okay. Okay. Just one little story for you. This is a very special lady, Meg Donahue, and Meg's mom has a special relationship to Dr. Esselstyn and Ann's work. And I don't know if you know this, but I thought maybe it would be nice for you to just tell them what you do and what has happened with your mother.
Sure. Hi, thank you. My name is Meg Donahue, and I'm the co-founder of Mama Says Foods. And we make whole food, plant-based meals and deliver them direct to customer, fresh and ready-made. And we started because when my mom was 80 years old, she was released to hospice care with less than 10% heart function. And her kidneys had been failing, and it was just an escalating, and it was hospice. And so I brought her home to live with me, and I Googled who has survived this. And I came across a lot of rabbit holes, but finally I came across Dr. Esselstyn's book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And I thought I ate a good diet. And so it was kind of a new concept to me. And I just said, whatever it takes, we're just going to try this. We can't have nothing to lose. And so we fed her little micro meals. And she was in and out of ICU. So this was the end. And we fed her these little micro meals. And gradually she kind of stabilized. And about 6 months into this, she could walk around her apartment. And then she started to be able to walk up and down our driveway. So she was 80. She's going to turn 89 in 3 months. Yeah. She swims 3 times a week. She drives. She learned how to play the ukulele. Her heart function, and these are the things, because you can hear anecdotal stories, but when you see the science behind it, and you go, wow, her heart function was here, and now it's here. Her heart function is at the low end of normal. She's off. I mean, I have, advanced degrees, and I had to have spreadsheets to keep track of her medications when she first arrived, and it was making me crazy. And she is off so many medications. She is fabulous. I mean, she has so much energy, and it is solely the reason she is well is because, one, Dr. Esselstyn's book. I mean, it was like a godsend. It was a godsend. And then she just followed it. And what she went from somebody who ate what we thought was a great diet, and I think it's important to say, she was the person who, she looked fit, she played golf, she played tennis, she ate chicken, just a little bit, had some fish, did yoga, and yet she and my dad both had heart-related and artery-related illnesses. My dad ended up passing away from it. And so we didn't know. And so to have our worldview so dramatically shifted in such a big moment, it let us know that we needed to be able to do something to help people realize the power of food. And I'm a latecomer to the game. These guys have been at it way before me, and we just wanted to contribute, and that's what our company does. And I can't say enough about it. And to have your mom, when you think you're going to lose, or anybody important to you, or yourself, anybody, and to see such a dramatic shift, and the only difference is food, it is a miracle, going from foods that hurt to foods that heal. So thank you. And we're Mama Says. And one thing, we are working with Dr. Weiss. We've developed a product line because he is all about food as medicine. And there's a lot of fake or junk vegan food. It can kind of be distracting. And so we make a line of products for Dr. Weiss that are phenomenal. And we hear from customers, and I know Dr. Weiss does, of their transformation and their health turning around. And so we're doing a tasting over in the veggie shed over there of our Moroccan Stew. That's a Dr. Weiss Moroccan Stew. And I'll tell you, these guys, we work with a lot of people, and we do a lot of recipe development, and they put together a product. I don't know how much you know about food production, and I won't bore you with it, but it's a lot of work getting the science of it right to get what you really want to have happen. And these folks they pushed us to be better and to work, and we came up with something that we know is really phenomenal. We just don't think it, and it tastes great, which is even more important, because if it doesn't taste good, nobody's going to eat it. So it's good food. It's over there. We would love to share it with you, and we have a discount for anybody. If you go on our site, mamasays.com, Weiss approved, and it's a 10% discount. It's a rare thing. We don't discount very much at all, but for this case, we really want people to experience it and have the experience for themselves and their family. So Weiss approved. It's 10% off, and it's phenomenal, and you can taste it over there and try it for yourself. So thank you very much.